Thank you very much for the introduction. Appreciate it. Hello, y'all. How you doing today? I have to explain to you, I'm not anticipating that I'm going to be able to beat this lunch. I mean, I saw the brownies that you all have. I don't know if I'm going to give you as big a sugar high as those brownies will give you, but I'll try. I'll try to do my best with it. I want to pick up on one of the points that Rob was making in the introduction. I do communication, and as a result of being communication, people think that I know something. And a lot of different people doing a lot of different things think that, man, if we just had more communication in this project, baby, we could, fill in the blank. So it's put me in rooms, particularly in the government work I was doing, with the Department of Defense, the FBI, Commerce, Labor, HHS. The consulting work I'm doing now has put me with nonprofits, NGOs, Fortune 500 types, small business startups, insurance, pharma. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't worked with anybody in tobacco, but that's to the best of my knowledge. Perhaps I was and I didn't even realize who they were. And as a result of all this range of experience that I've had, it has given me a lot of insight into understanding exactly how persuasion works and how it doesn't, and particularly in real-world applications. If you remember nothing else about what I want to be talking with you about this today, it's this simple phrase: count the change. That's all I'm interested in. That's what my whole career has been about, is counting the change. Persuasion is a change business. It's using words to make a difference with freely choosing other guys. Okay? Change. Count the change. That's all I'm interested in learning about. I want to understand how to change people. And an important part of understanding making the change in the other guy is counting it. If you can't count it, you can't change it. Okay, and if anybody tells you they're in the change business and anything in their effort is aiming at changing other guys, if they can't count it, they are not changing. They don't know what they're talking about. You need to remember that. Always count the change. Okay? What I'd like to share with you right now is a fairly simple model that I've been using in communication, and it's sort of, let's see if I can make this, okay, Rob, here we go. It's an amalgamation of a bunch of different theories and practices that have occurred. Wait, there's a light problem. We need turn the light. It's hard to see this. I need to be brighter. Okay. An amalgam of a lot of different theories that have been very well tested in terms of research, but also in terms of practice. If you're really well read in this area, you might recognize it as the McGuire matrix also. Let's start here again with a basic idea of what I've been engaged in, try to understand. Right? Anytime you're using communication, words, sounds, images, and you're trying to change other guys who are free to choose, they've got volition. They're not being forced. They can tell you to drop dead. They can go do something else. Okay? Free choice is an important part of this process. Okay? When you're using communication to change free people, you're aiming at how they think, how they feel, or how they act. Any of those three areas. That's persuasion. Okay? Now, one of the things I've been interested in is how people use persuasion, particularly in using behavior change interventions. A number of years ago, Leslie Snyder was commissioned to do a meta-analysis of large-scale communication interventions aimed at behavior change. This was published in 2001. It's been updated since. I've seen other meta-analytic work done like this with internet-based deliveries. The results are not changing. What Leslie did was found all published peer-reviewed literature that had interventions either pre-post as the design or treatment and control. Treatment, one group gets the communication control, the other doesn't. You measure them pre-post for the change, counting the change, right? On the bottom axis down here, we have the effect size expressed as a correlation coefficient. Okay? On the scale going up on the upside, that's the number of studies. Okay? What Leslie found is that the average persuasion intervention trying to get behavior change in public health averaged a correlation of 0.09. Okay, that's a small effect size in behavior change parlance. Small is 0.1, medium is 0.3, large is a 0.5 correlation. What's more interesting to me than the mean, that 0.09, that small change that you tend to get with persuasion interventions, is you notice that the distribution of the effects is not normal, right? Instead of seeing a bell curve that you would normally expect to see, you see that the overwhelming majority of the interventions are squished up to 0. Okay? Indeed, 2/3 of the studies that had been published for Leslie's meta, 2/3 of them are below the average. 1/3 are better than average. Okay? Now, a lot of people I've run into in public health, in medicine, safety studies, even people outside marketing, business, okay, well, communicate small effect size. Hey, man, that's a 10% change. That's not bad. But for me, when I see that, I think, well, you're looking at this the wrong way. Most people are not getting a change that counts. Very few people are actually producing interventions that count the change, right? Instead of just sort of throwing whatever idea a person may have about trying to persuade other guys, why don't we look on our right-hand side here and understand those interventions that get the bigger effect sizes? Right? Don't settle for average. Don't settle for 0.09 when there are other ones that are going on. Well, for me, when I look at these studies down on this side, some interesting things occur, and we can generalize from it into what I call the local box play intact. Before you start doing an intervention, one of the things we understand is that people who do the better job of actually counting the change, of making something happen, understand these 4 words, and these are just words that I've invented. All right? The local is the big circle. The local is life that's happening right now. We're in a local right here and right now, okay? And if I wanted to do some sort of a persuasion intervention related to eating high sugar desserts, this would be a good local for it, wouldn't it? Right? Because the local contains it. Now, there's a bigger local around us. There's the university, there's this building, there's the region we're in, there's the, okay? You have to understand what your local is, where the persuasion is actually going to occur. If I'm trying to deal with people in sugar consumption, is the local exactly this room at this time? Or is the local going to be over a longer period of time on this campus in multiple different locations? It's important I understand what the local is. Next, within the local, I have to make a box. I have to localize things. I have to select small elements out of this situation right here, right now, that I want to focus on. For example, I know in a box I could build here, I'm dealing with people who are highly educated. Right? That's a different kind of box that I can build knowing that everybody in here has a college education. Right? Compared to, I'm not sure what the closest shopping mall is around here, or the closest Walmart. That's another local. They might be eating high sugar. But the box I would build would be different because of the people who are coming in there. All right? Next, I want to try to figure out, given the local I've got, the box I've decided to work within, what are the kind of plays I can use with highly educated people who are listening to a presentation as they're eating and being exposed to different kinds of food. Right? There are a lot of different plays, and we might talk a little bit about that. That's usually what people think of when doing the intervention as the hammer part. How am I going to hammer the other guy? What am I going to do to make the change? No, you got to think about the local. You got to think about the box first, because all hammers don't work the same way in different locals and different boxes. Right? If you're a parent, you found that out. Right? There are some kind of hammers you can use with one kid that you can't use with another kid. Right? Different box, different local. The last thing, and perhaps the most important, is what I call the tact. And notice we're hitting a tack here with the hammer. The tack is the target, action, context, and time, or who does what, when, and where. Most people fail at persuasion because they don't define the tack very well. We want people to be healthier. That's our tack. Okay, we want to lower diabetes. Okay, to a lot of people, making a statement like that sounds like that's a sufficient enough target. What I want to tell you is, those interventions that get better effect sizes, much more carefully and specifically define who does what, when, and where. The target, the action, the context, and the time. Right? Interventions that have well-defined, tight little tacks, they know exactly who, doing exactly what, when, and where, are the ones that actually hit hit the hammer on the nail and create a change that they can count. Okay? So we got some ideas here. We're understanding what persuasion is. Right? It's using words to change, freely choosing other guys, change the way they think, feel, or behave. Right? We understand the importance of these kinds of ideas of that the local, what's the reality they're dealing with right now as I'm going to do the persuasion. What elements of that local can I create a box? And if you will, a trap. Right? How can I trap everybody in the local in this particular box that I can then take a specific kind of hammer to hit them with and drive the tack that I want? What's amazing to me is this applies with everything. I use the parent example, that's great. If you want to get people to start smoking, this is a great model to use. If you want to get people to quit smoking, this is a great model to use. Anytime you're dealing with people who have free choice in how they think, how they feel, or how they act, you can think with these thoughts. You can construct with this. Okay? Now let's get a little bit more operational with this. We're going to use communication. That's all I'm concerned with. That's what I know how to do. I'm not going to use power. I'm not going to use regulation. I'm not going to use policy. I'm not going to use taxes. Okay? I'm using words, images, sounds. One of the things that common sense teaches is that just simply saying something to another guy is not sufficient to get the change out of him. Merely putting messages out is not sufficient to get the downstream behavior change you want. And it's because of what I call the cascade. A message has to take the other guy through a series of stages. Failure at any one stage will kill the downstream behavior change that you're seeking. Reception's pretty obvious. Do they get the message? It was kind of weird for me today when I was walking in here. I was looking for a restroom, and the way I found the restroom was I found a poster that had my face on it, and it was right next to the men's room. And it was like, Steve, go here. You know, and it's strange, and it's happened to me on a lot of different occasions just to be kind of walking around. It's like, am I in the right place? Oh, there's my face. I'm in the right place. This is where I belong. Right? Well, that's not reception for me. I mean, that was not Rob trying to give me a point at where the men's room was here on the first floor at Lamb Hall. I don't think. Okay? But putting those posters out aims at getting other guys to receive the message that something's happening in this room at this time in this place. Right? It involves this guy. Right? And that's step one. And you know a lot of people have walked by that poster with my bright and shining face. Right? And of course they're all here. Okay? You see the operation now of the cascade. A lot of people receive the message of the posters being up. A lot of people receive the message on TV about quitting smoking. Or whatever the behavior is. Nutrition, exercise. But simply because you've seen the message doesn't mean that you really got the message. Right? Which leads us to the second phase in the cascade, and that's processing. You actually observe the message and you think about it. You get it. You do something with it. You think about it at a very deep level. Gee, that's a good-looking guy in that picture. Boy, he looks smart. And it's about persuasion and change. Think of the things this fella could teach me. And there's lunch too? My goodness. It could be a conversation in the head like that. Or it could be, oh, free food. Right? But at least they process the message. They think about it. They saw it. They're also thinking about it. Third step in here is what I call response. Not only does the person engage, they get the message, they process it, there's the conversation in the head, but that conversation in the head changes the way they think in that particular instance and motivates the behavior to actually show up here. They think to themselves as, oh, gee, that's a good-looking guy. Oh, free food. This would be fun. It's about persuasion. I've been working about something and doing health communication. We were talking about that project, and we could do that. That would be interesting to do. And then they take out an appointment calendar or their smartphone, right? And they write down and make the date. Something up here changes how they react to it, right? They respond favorably. The change in that response then predisposes the behavior, the ultimate goal of all of this. People show up here, right? Every message that aims at changing another guy has got to go through this cascade. If you goof up at any one of these phases, everything fails, right? Leslie's work was very interesting about this. Particularly if you're doing large scale. And this is large enough for what we're talking about here. Define however big this audience is. It's more than 10 or 20 people. If at least 80% of an audience does not know they got the message, the intervention is going to fail. This is just almost like a law, all right? Any intervention that does not get 80% reception is not going to work. It's going to be a dog, all right? No matter, you can have, Kate Upton is probably the hottest, attractive woman in America today. You could have Kate Upton pitching the thing, and if 80% of the people don't register it, you're not going to get any change from the program, all right? This is where a lot of marketing comes in and learning how to get the attention of the audience, right, so that they know what's happening. Next, you have to design messages that they will think the way you want them to think about, and it will make key changes in that response. And now what I got to do, this is a real general model at this point, right? You could take any theory that you've ever been trained in to figure, all right, now how am I going to generate reception? And you can look at mass media theory for that. Okay, what do I do? What's message processing? What does that mean to you? What's my theory that explains how people get a message and think about it? All right, pick that theory, plug it in there. Response, what do I have to change internally in people? You got all sorts of internal change theories. You could pick one of those. But you got to fill those in specifically. This is how I do it with what I call the standard model. For me, this is based on what I think is the best research out there. This is not my stuff. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to sell anything that is proprietary to me. This is what I've used. This is what I've seen other people use. These are the ones that, when you count the change, produce the biggest effects. Reception is largely driven by three factors that have been proven time and time again in mass media research. Where you put the message, how often you put the message out there, and does the message stick out? Those are the three big things, okay? Placement, right by the men's room, right by entrances and exits. That's good placement for a message, okay? Frequency is both how many times a different message is out there and how many different days is it out there. I have no idea how often those posters are up there or how long they were, but there was some frequency. Contrast is a problem. You go by all the bulletin boards, I was a little bit disappointed. You're looking at other people, okay? I saw my picture up there and there were other prettier faces right next to it. Okay, I didn't see much contrast for me on that one. There wasn't a lot of stick out, so even though you might have these messages plastered all over at every entrance, great placement. Where's the contrast on it? What makes it stick out? My theory of processing is the elaboration likelihood model out of Persuasion, Rich Petty and John Cacioppo. If you prefer Shelley Chaikin's heuristic systematic model, that's okay. Those two pretty much say the same thing. They, to me, are the premier ways of thinking about how people deal with persuasive information. All right? To me, they're as proven as any scientific theory can be in behavioral sciences. So standard principles out of mass media, the elaboration likelihood model for the processing phase, and then you might recognize in this the theory of planned behavior as the response variables. Okay? Fishbein and Eisen with that. Theory of reasoned action, where we start there first with norms and attitudes, and then later Isaac added in the efficacy notion, right, all driving towards intention. So you see what you're trying to do is you create a message that is going to be processed either through arguments or cues using the Yellum kind of talk. Arguments, very thoughtful, long conversation in the head. You're standing there in the checkout line. You're standing there in line in the supermarket and you're looking at all the cans of tomato and you think lycopene and how much salt in there. Oh, migrant workers must have been picked. You know, all the arguments about it. Or you use cues. Oh, that's a pretty red one right there. And just grabbing it, cueing off. Oh, Kate Upton! All right? Regardless of how I have them process, it's going to have to change key elements in here. Their attitude, their norm, their efficacy towards performing the behavior. All right? So I design messages that are going to change those key response elements that drive the behavior, which I've defined as attack. Right? A who does what, when, and where. You see how systematic this is? It's also very simple. I mean, this is not rocket science, but there are a lot of moving parts in here, and most of the time, people doing communication kind of interventions, people doing persuasion in the broadest sense of the word, are nowhere near to filling in these simple blanks. They do not think, even in their own words, And you can rewrite all of these words however you want. Okay, you can use your own lingo with it. But man, did we have a good placement strategy? You know, my God, we kind of bought stuff. You know, we got a marketing guy and he went out and he bought things. Well, where did it get placed? Do you know? Do you know how often it was out there? Did it really stick out? All right. Did we test how people actually process these messages? I mean, if we think that we've got arguments up there about lycopene and salt content and are they actually thinking about that stuff? Or are they thinking about something else? Or would they really prefer to see Kate Upton? Okay? And if we use Kate Upton, will it get the normative behavior change, or I'm sorry, the norm change that we want so that then, oh, Kate Upton does it, let's all be like Kate, and let's go eat a lot of raw tomatoes. All right? People don't think through all of that. Notice we've got this model here for thinking top down in the cascade and how the message has to work to create the behavior change. If you want to plan, you come back this other way. You define your tack. Who does what, when, and where. Okay? When you know what the tack is, you can then do a theory of planned behavior analysis. You find two groups of people. People who are already doing the tack, people who are not doing the tack, and you give them a theory of planned behavior survey. You know what will happen? When you do a t-test comparing those two groups, you will find attitude, norm, and efficacy differences. They will literally tell you why they are different. They'll tell you what their attitude differences are. They'll tell you what their norm differences are. They will tell you what their efficacy differences are. Oh! Now what do? We now come back up the model. Me using Elam. What are my message strategies? Using the idea of wattage. Are people high watt, really thinking hard on this central route? Are they low watt peripheral Q guys? Okay, what's my wattage strategy? How do I make sure they're high watt or low watt? And if they're high watt, what are the arguments that change these variables that make the difference? What are the cues that would, bang, drive the tack right now? Kate Upton, bang, grab that tomato can. All right? Then after I've identified those messages, I can come up with my reception plan. How am I going to distribute all of this stuff? What else is nice about this thing is you can count the change with it too. When you are trying to understand the impact that your intervention has, you can ask questions of people like, have you seen this message? Have you seen Steve beside the urinal? Right? And you can count reception. You can ask questions about the conversation in the head and wattage, right? If you did see the message, how did you think about it? You know, did you really think a lot of thoughts? Did you try hard? Or were you aware of Kate Upton in her bikini? Okay? And then now you can tell me your response. What's your, after seeing these messages, what's your attitude, what's your norm, what's your efficacy, all that kind of stuff. I was doing a standard model intervention when I was an administrator in NIOSH. And the first year it went very, very well. And all the data here that we got back looked great. The second year, the thing just dropped dead. I mean, it just died. It stopped. It had a heart attack for no good reason. Nothing changed. Everything was very positive about all of this stuff, except we weren't getting any behavior change. And what we discovered went all the way back to reception in some of the surveys, and this is something I found out about my project team. There were two guys involved from two different units in the government who hated each other's guts, okay? Hated each other with passion that had gone on for over 20 years. I didn't know about it, okay? Two completely different offices. I didn't know they knew each other. That's how stupid I was. What had happened is, one guy who was helping me was in the first year making all of this stuff happen, and it was going very well. The other guy found out about this intervention in the second year and did everything he could to kill it with the people we were trying to change. He was using all the resources he had as another government administrator to stop it. I figured it out from looking at the surveys. And then I was able to trace through my project team and find who was actually killing me with this thing. Your tax dollars at work. All right? So understand, if you want to use words to change freely choosing other people in the way they think, feel, and behave, you want to define that tact. You want to see who does the tact, who doesn't do the tact. Do your response analysis. Make the comparison between the two groups. Use whatever theory you want to use. Don't use health beliefs. Don't use framing. Don't use threat. Don't use risk. Don't use fear appeals. They don't work. Now, you're going to have other people in here who would stand up and say, he's an idiot. count the change. Count the change on health beliefs. Count the change on fear. They don't produce change that counts. Compare it to the theory of reasoned action. Compare it to the theory of planned behavior. Social cognitive. You can count the change with those guys. If you keep working with threat, with fear, with risk, framing, just get a big party. Invite everybody you're trying to change to the party, get them drunk, and say, this is what you need to do. You're going to have as much impact, okay? Count the change on that. You can laugh at me, okay? You don't have to believe me. Go count the change. Go meta-analysis, health beliefs. Meta-analysis, fear appeals. Meta-analysis, theory of reasoned action, planned behavior, control, whatever you want. The numbers don't even match up. You can, let me flash way back here. Remember this? Okay, kids, count the change. These guys don't do fear appeals. These guys don't do threat or risk. Okay? These guys do threat, risk, health beliefs, susceptibility. Okay, all that stuff. It doesn't count the change. It doesn't produce change. And if you count it, there's no change to count. At the other side, you've got people who are doing something like the cascade and are filling it in with stuff that they can prove counts the change. They don't use my 3 principles of mass media for reception. They've got something else. Okay, if you can count the change with that, if you can prove to me, prove to yourself that that produces reception, go for it. I got no trouble with it. If you've got a different theory of message processing, of how people think when you present persuasive information to them, that's okay. Fine. Count the change. Make sure you can prove that whatever theory you've got is actually producing the change you desire. And the same thing with whether you use theory of planned behavior or whatever the thing is. It will make a difference. Okay? I've been prattling and jabbering and all that, and you're sitting here and I don't know, is the sugar wearing out? Are you coming off and just, and it's warm in here and you can hear the lawnmower and it's like, which is a bigger drone, the lawnmower or the guy talking, Anybody got any questions? Anybody want to stand up and take a punch? Got some ideas? Yes, Randy?
Talk a little about elaboration. I don't understand that concept.
He asked, he wants more clarification on the concept called elaboration. That is hitting the nail on the head. That is the crucial element of the theory called elaboration likelihood model. Elaboration, think of embroidery. Okay, if you have ever seen somebody do embroidering work, they add detail to stuff. When people elaborate over persuasive information, they add their own thoughts to it. They embroider. You present lower in salt, high in lycopene, not made with slave labor. Okay? If people are elaborating, they will, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, gee, it's lower in salt. Well, that's good. I've been having a talk with my doctor about my blood pressure, and salt's related to it. Those are elaborations. When people engage in elaborative activity, free, spontaneous, all their own, this is their stuff. They're not robots. They're not being forced to think this. This is their own free thinking. They're on the central route. That is the best kind of attitude changes you can hope to get, is when people actually carefully think about the information you're presenting to them, they generate their own thoughts. By contrast, people do not elaborate the same way over cues. Kate Upton, okay, famous George Clooney, famous song, whatever the thing is. Let's be hip and cool and let's get Jay-Z to be in a video doing something about one thing or the other. People see that and they don't elaborate over it. They just recognize it. Ooh, Kate Upton. I have an immediate response, affectively, ding-dong. It's a classically conditioned response. And I ding-dong my response to the product or service or behavior or lifestyle or whatever is being made available. So Randy, elaboration is the crucial thing. And for me, that's what makes the theory so cool. It's also the same thing about learning. People remember things they elaborate over. When you're studying material that you've got to pass a test on, if you elaborate on that material, you're wildly better to remember it and use it, whether it's on a test or in practice or whatever it is. When people just rotely memorize things and use mnemonics or heuristics to just kind of have a 1, 2, 3 to remember what the list is, kind of like, what are the 5 Great Lakes? Holmes, what are the 5 Great Lakes? Okay. All right, you see, slowly all drag through Superior. What a crew. I'll tell you, you need more sugar in these brownies. This is great stuff up here. You should be screaming and swinging from the chandeliers with it. But oh no, flatten it out. And you knew what it is. It's the vegetables. This damn vegetable. And that's the truth. Vegetables don't make you smarter in the instance. Sugar does. Liquor. Tobacco. So anyway, elaboration likelihood is a really big deal for this message processing thing. You have to understand if the change you're trying to produce in people, do you really want them to be thoughtful? Okay. Well, if you want people to do this long conversation in the head, a lot of embroidery and all that stuff, you have to have two things that are absolutely irrevocably got to be there. First, they got to be high watt when they do. They got, I'm high, willing, and able to think. I'm tuned in, okay? And whatever happens, I'm going to embroider it, okay? Now, that's dangerous. When people are high watt, you don't know where they're going to go, okay? And that's why a lot of times if you're a zealot and you get people's attention, you get them high watt, you had better have the second thing. You better have good arguments. Because if you don't have good arguments when you got high watt processors, you are going to get killed. You have done the worst thing you could do. You got people in a persuasion moment and you push them the other direction, okay? And I have to admit, a lot of people I've run into in public health do this on a regular basis. They've managed to get people high watt, and then they make them mad, right? And they tell them, no, I'm not doing, what? And it's not an immediate emotion. I'm exaggerating, being dramatic with it. It's all up here. It's like, well, that's not true. That can't be right. I know other things. My own experience contradicts this. It's high watt. It's elaborative. They're thinking very carefully. You may say it's not scientific. It's not supported by the research. But the key thing, it's in that guy's head, right? And that's what's driving all the change up there. I also have, I don't think we'll get to it, I have rules of persuasion. Maybe this would be a good time to do it right now. Yeah, what? Okay. Okay. Now, simply because there aren't laws of persuasion doesn't mean that there aren't rules. Okay? Go back to the slide with Leslie's meta-analysis. I think the guys on that side know the rules. The guys up here think they know the laws, right? And there aren't any. This is what was triggering in my mind that led me to do this. An awful lot of times when people are trying to change other guys, they make it about themselves rather than the other guy. You're trying to change them. It doesn't matter if they're thinking stupid thoughts, if they're thinking wrong things. That's the guy you want to change. Too many people I run into who say they're in the change business. I'm here to make the world a better place. No, actually they're here to feel better about themselves. Okay? Well, if people aren't changing, they're still smoking? Okay. Well, if they're going to be that stupid, just go ahead and do it. I did my best. No, you didn't. You made no change. If you do your best and you get no change, you don't know anything about persuasion. I mean, that's just prima facie. I mean, that's just on the face of it. You're not doing what you said you're doing. You're making yourself feel better. The hardest thing in the world to do is to shut yourself down, and as you're talking to that other person like you're doing some pilot testing, what are arguments to get people to exercise more or eat lower fat diets? And you're talking to people, the non-doers, and you cannot believe what they're saying. Who cares? That's not your problem. You don't have to prove anything to them. You just have to manipulate the way they think about things. All right? This is closely related to it. And it's another problem with a lot of guys I run into in public health. I mean, you believe what you're doing, right? That's why you're doing it. You know that people are killing themselves with lifestyle choices, drug use, abuse, or non-use. You know that's going on. You're sincere about this. It's about the other guy, stupid. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you feel. I don't care what you do. I care about the other guy, right? Your sincerity is oftentimes the worst enemy to your best persuasion efforts because you're just constantly, I can't do that. That's just, that would cause, I just can't, that violates, that's a violation. Okay, I appreciate it. It violates your sincerity. You can't persuade the other guy then. Just give that up. Go do something else, right? If you want to persuade other guys, if you want to get changes in the way they think, feel, or behave, you have to take your sincerity out of the equation. You have to take your point of view out of the equation. It's about the other guy, stupid, okay? I learned very quickly when I was in the government that you had to get these guys when they showed up in all the, the big Fed rooms. It's the coat of many colors and the table of brother and sisterhood and all that stuff. What you had to do is find all the sincere guys and make a task force and give them ribbons and prizes and have luncheons with prawns. That worked extremely well at NIH. And get all these sincere guys over in this room and have subcommittees and write reports and get them the hell out of the way. And then get the other guys who are insincere, it's about the other guy stupid, how are we going to get whatever change we want in the other guys? And they'd actually go do the work while these guys were, Charlie Rose, New York Times, making sure that they were getting publicity with things. You can imagine how well I went over in the government. If you can't count it, you can't change it. Also notice this bottom line here too. Simply because you can count it doesn't mean you can change it. Rob remarked, wow, I look just like that picture, right? It looked just like, except for these gray hairs here, right? And you can count all these gray hairs in here, but you can't change them. Okay, you can color them, but that's not changing them. Okay, you can shave them off, but they're still underneath. And we know what all this count means. I'm getting old, right? And I'm heading for the last roundup. That's where this is going, right here. And I can count the change, but simply because I can count the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10. Simply because I can count the change doesn't mean I can change it, right? Okay, and it takes a fair amount of wisdom to understand that there's some things that you are counting and you just can't change it. So don't even mess with it. Okay, persuasion is about changing the other guy. If you're not changing the other guy, stop. Right? It's pretty simple. This is another one. A lot of guys that I work with in health and science and safety and all of that stuff, they're scientists who have science. And that's why people should change, because I have science. And they're very persuasive as they're presenting their falling apples. And it's like, if an apple is falling, why do you need to persuade? The apple's going to hit you in the head. If you got science, believe me, reality is going to overcome the other guy, right? You don't persuade when you got science. Anytime somebody identifies themselves as a scientist, and then they start talking about Kate Upton, so to speak, right? They try to get persuasive. I ask myself, aren't we sitting under a tree waiting for an apple to fall on our head? Instead, when you find people who think they've got science who are trying to persuade, they don't have falling apples, they have fallen apples. This is Adam and Eve and the serpent and that apple, okay? They're trying to make people go in a particular direction as opposed to, I got science, I don't care. A lot of what's going on, for example, with global warming falls into this trap. A lot of people are taking what they're saying is science and they're trying to persuade with it. And it should be obvious. Right? This apple will hit people in the head. And I know science guys will say, well, we've got to warn you in advance because it's already gotten so bad if we don't do something now. I appreciate that argument. But I also understand that an awful lot of people who say they are doing science are also persuading. Understand the tension and the problem that creates for you. When you go after other guys calling yourself a scientist, if they sense that you're trying to persuade them, they're going to doubt your science. Okay? So you have to be careful about how you come after people, how you identify yourself. You probably want to leave science in your back pocket if you're leading with persuasion. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay? And again, just that contrast, hold those metaphors of the falling apple and the fallen apple. For yourself, for listening to what other people are pitching at you. Okay, and it's like, wow, he's talking, this is a high-paid consultant. He's saying if we do this business or this kind of information technology, it's going to work and it's great. He's selling me falling apples. But it's like he's talking about discounts and he's being slick and he's taking us out to dinner and he's doing all of this fallen apple stuff. It's like, wait a minute, man. If you got a falling apple, just set me under the apple tree, okay? Okay, I'm going to get real situational with this. Great persuaders don't need shootings in elementary school buildings. Okay, if you're waiting for a superstorm named Sandy Okay, if you're waiting for the levee to break, you don't know anything about persuasion. That's waving the bloody shirt. That's emotionalism. That's politics. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't, go do it. I got no trouble with that. But if you're saying you're being persuasive and you're waiting for a streetcar named Super Sandy or Sandy Hook or fill in the blank with whatever the disaster is, you really don't know anything about persuasion. If you know how to persuade, you can make it happen. You don't need kindness from strangers. You don't need dumb luck. You don't need third-party vote splitters, little help from you. You make it happen. And you just use words to do it. That's all persuasion is, right? Now, understand that this should help you to classify what you're good at and what you're not good at. If you need a streetcar named Desire, if you need kindness from strangers, if you need you're not a persuasion guy. That's important to know. Don't waste your time on it. Go find somebody else who does know how to do it if you really need persuasion. Understand your strengths by listening to these rules and thinking about it. I can skip by that one. We already did that one. Yeah. Oh, well, let me do this one. Come back, yeah. And I will close on this. Yeah, so we've got a few minutes to chat here at the end. In light of what I was just saying, take these rules and everything else I've been talking about, not only to get some ideas about what you can do, but also understand what you don't like to do, what you're not good at, what you don't want to learn how to do. Persuasion is a very specific kind of skill. And the scariest way I can put it to you is to use, of all people, as a source to quote Friedrich Nietzsche, the existential fellow, God is dead, that kind of guy. Persuasion is beyond good and evil. He wrote a book, Beyond Good and Evil, talking about what life and God meant and all that, and that philosophy was beyond good and evil. So is persuasion. Persuasion doesn't care anything about good or evil. All persuasion cares about is counting the change. That's it. Okay, if there's deception involved, well, think about it. Deception has its costs. If you get caught, it's very, very bad. If you don't get caught, it's very, very good. Okay? It's beyond good and evil. All right? If you have problems with good and evil, then persuasion may not be your cup of tea. Okay? If you make those kinds of distinctions in your life, if you live by them, you're sincere with good and evil, persuasion can be difficult. Because it's all about the other guy. It's not about my sincerity. Do I get the change? I'd argue that you don't have to be deceptive or dishonest to get change out of people in the overwhelming majority of situations. So you're not lying, but you are a lot of times feeling like you're lying because you're doing things you don't believe. You're doing things that you don't do yourself, all as a means of getting the other guy to change. And that's the whole point of persuasion. Which leads to this last line for the closeout here. If you can't succeed, don't try. If you try and fail, you've made things worse. Why do you want to make your job more difficult? Right? If you can't change the other guy, don't even try the thing, you make things worse. If you can't change the other guy, it might be telling you things about your values, your skill set, how you want to live your life, and that's fine. Okay? Let me flip real quickly here, and I'll use this as the terminal slide. Okay, that's some contact and more information related to me. And we can bring up the lights, open the windows, turn on the air conditioning, and chat some if you would like to, Rob. Okay? Yes, sir.
Just a general kind of conceptual thought. What is the difference between persuasion, as you've described it, and what is commonly politically described as we're going to tax people to persuade them to pursue good behavior versus bad behavior?
I'd call that power, just to make the simplest distinction, carrots and sticks. Now, I can use carrots and sticks in how I talk. I can imply them. I can be conceptual with them and saying, here's the carrot of you will feel better if you exercise more and you will feel, and that's a carrot and a stick approach. But in terms of the hammer you're using to hit the tack, persuasion, it's just, me a smile and a shoe shine. Power is, I'm going to tax you. I'm putting you in jail. It's another one of the slides I had up here. Power and persuasion go together very well. But one of the problems is power corrupts everything, and power corrupts persuasion. A lot of guys who are good at power are lousy because it's just like, you're not doing what I want? Well, shoot the bastard. Hey, tax him. Put him in jail. What? I'm not. Michael Bloomberg is getting like that sometimes, and stuff that's going on in New York City. It's just like, I can't believe what you just said. Why did you do that? Why didn't you try a little more? I'm tired of it. I've had it up to here with these bozos. I'm sick of the tobacco guys, the soda guys, the big this, the big that. Shoot them. Put them in jail. Out of business. Well, that's power. That works. Okay? To me, it kills persuasion. And generally, my experience with limited power I've ever had in my life, the less you use it, the stronger it is. And as soon as guys start going to the power game all the time, they're going to run out of bullets. You know, they're going to be guys who see you're always a power guy, always shooting, and they start wearing bulletproof vests. They start maneuvering, you're out of bullets, and then they come and get you. Right? Persuasion can make your bullets last a little bit longer before you actually have to start using them. That's just a real simple way to think about it. It's an external, I can do this to you, power, carrots and sticks. Persuasion, you got free choice, you can go whatever you want. I can say, hey, if you don't quit smoking, you're going to drop dead, but I can't shoot you for it. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
You seem to imply that you eventually do have to use power in some cases. So I'm thinking about really complicated behavior change like nutrition and weight loss, things like that. How long do you make an attempt at persuading with just words before you start?
Okay, it goes to the tact. Why does the tact arise for me? And I have really turned, and now you can, I'll make everybody mad. I think the whole diet and exercise thing is wildly overplayed. If you look at meta-analytic stuff on the impact the diet and exercise has on mortality, it's spit in the wind. I mean, it is trivial. And it's like, what? What are you? It's a quarter of a small effect. I mean, the Harvard Epi guys are famous. You know, this cup of 20-ounce soda is going to kill you. And they can prove it statistically. Okay? And it's like, well, yeah, it's statistically significant. Yeah, you got 485,000 cases in the sample. So, yeah, it's statistically significant. What's the effect size? The effect size is a tenth of, I'll be even more, okay, Chairman Tom running the CDC. How much did they spend on that anti-tobacco advertising campaign? Nobody knows? Come on, you're public health. Tobacco, that's a big deal. CDC just ran a bazillion-dollar you're kidding me. Nobody here really? It was either $60 million or $250 million national ad campaign based in fair appeals. Okay. He guaranteed when he did it that there will be 50,000 people who will quit smoking as a result of this advertising campaign. Do the math on that. There are 45 million smokers. He says 50,000 are going to quit because of this. You know what that quit rate is? I'm going to make it easy. It's 1/1000th of a percent change. Do you know how large of a sample he would have had to have collected pre and post? And it'd have to be a random sample to prove that his $250 million advertising campaign cost 50,000 people to quit smoking. It would have cost as much money to do the evaluation as it would have done to do the intervention itself. That is a zero effect size. His 50,000 people, that's zero. That's rounding to zero, okay? I count the change. And I have really good training in background in applied statistics. I know how to do the math. And if you want to fight with me, I'd love to. I got no trouble with it all. Really do. And I'll make you come up here and write it down, okay? And then I'll do the same, and I'll play by the same rules. I won't clown around with that stuff. Now, going back to your point, you really, as a persuasion guy who's done practical, you know, I was in government. I was involved in firefighting safety project before September 11th, and I watched 300 of my guys get killed doing what they weren't supposed to do. Okay? That was really hard to deal with. I'm used to dealing with persuasion under very important circumstances. I mean, literally life and death. Also working with insurance guys, trying to make billions of dollars. I've been around, can you smell the greed? I mean, it just reeks with okay. I'm aware of practical persuasion, how it works. You have to understand what your tact is. You can't do everything all at once. All right? For me, the people who want to work on stand, don't sit. Distracted driving. That's the effect size. Sodas. Most stuff that's coming out nowadays is we got to march on this kind of stuff. To me, it's like, God, you're talking a national intervention. It would cost a lot of money to do this thing. And then what is the change you would get? You know that? It's like, well, can we think about what are some things, and I don't want to call it the low-hanging fruit thing because I find that kind of an insulting way to put it, but it's like, can you get people to quit smoking? Always wear seat belts. Don't abuse drugs. Prenatal. I mean, and for me, it's like, oh, we're talking about all this boring old crap that we've known since the 50s. That's what's still really killing a lot of people. So I would argue, and that's I'm talking out all sides of my mouth. You would think, as a Persuasion guy in a blue suit, hey, baby, you think that wearing a Halloween mask kills people? I'm down with that. I've got a $14 million proposal for you. If you give me $14 million, I'll make sure that kids don't wear or do wear. It doesn't matter. I'll make them do whatever you want if you've got $14 million. The kind of trivial effect sizes that I see in a lot of things, that's where guys like, the commercial guys like me, they're killing you guys. They're just all, you're one of those stand-out sets? You're one of those large serving soda guys? Look, here's my business card. I've got the slick, cool, Kate Upton, Kate Upton, Kate Upton. And that's the behavior change you're going to get out of it.
Good segue in my question. I noticed you referred to Kate Upton a lot in this messaging. How do you feel like the fields of persuasion and communication might move forward without being so appearance-focused or on the kind of over-sexualization of women?
It's about the other guy, stupid. It won't. Until men don't go, oh, Kate Upton. Okay, when men stop doing that, then, and the same, on the flip side, whatever you want to see as sexist thinking, feeling, behaving from women that you would like to see altered. Okay, yeah.
Without sexist messaging, how might the field look without that?
Oh, you would go with arguments. You would go that real central route kind of stuff. But again, it's one of those things, limited resources, you're trying to make change. Why do you do anything that slows you down? If you could see, again, all bad persuasion is sincere. Okay, I appreciate you got some beliefs. Hubba hubba. I don't give a rip. I want the other guys to always wear a condom. I want the other guys to stop using needle drugs or participate in needle exchange. If Kate Upton in a bikini will do that, why should that bother you?
I'd just rather people do it without having to look at Kate Upton.
Okay, I don't got no trouble with what you're saying, but you need to understand the tension you're working with. It's about the other guy. Your feelings don't count. Which do you want? Do you want to feel good or do you want change from the other guy? You want both. You can't have both.
She's hitting on an important, I do, my research essentially follows your pattern, and she's hitting on an important point, which is actually an exception to what you're talking about up there in the elaboration likelihood model, which is there's sometimes something, and I'm disagreeing with you, sometimes there's something more important than deep processing, and that is the basic biological kinds of things, which Kate Upton is tapping into.
Correct.
And if you ignore that, you're dead. And if that's the issue that you're dealing with, you are dead. Because people are very good at talking their way around your arguments if they have a primary need they're trying to meet.
Yeah.
That's a basic, I'm a psychologist. Basic.
Oh yeah, sure. The dissonance reduction and
I deal with this all the time. So what I do is indoor canning work, and I get nailed all the time for that. And what they want me to do is the other researchers want me to change team culture's views of appearance.
Yeah.
And I laugh.
Yes.
Good luck with that. Okay?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. I can't do that.
Yeah. For me, again, I think that touches all these last points we're having. Persuasion is cold-hearted. It just does not give a rip about anything other than did you change the other guy and could you count it? That's it. And when you enter into that arena, that's all you're dealing. And you can bring other stuff if you want. That's fine, but it is completely irrelevant to what's going on. And you will live or die not because of those beliefs, but because of changing the other guy.
It can hurt you. It can hurt you. Not just irrelevant, it can hurt you.
Well, yeah, that too.
And that's the thing I'm hearing, and what I'm feeling internally is that we get into this business in public health or in clinical management because we have some ideals that are very strong.
Yeah.
So when you think about the success that commercial ventures have on the exact opposite of what we in public health are trying to do is because they have a different view in their ethics. And of course, how do we as ethical beings distance from that, you know, not wanting to objectify women. It's like, I don't have an issue with that. But then how can I set that aside and say, okay, Kate Upton, come on, let's talk about this. And that is going to be hard to make that shift. And I can see what you're saying. I appreciate it.
Well, if you hire me at $5,000 an hour, I have the answer to that.
Can you do it in 1 hour?
Yes, in 1 hour, yeah.
Folks, I greatly appreciate
Yeah, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.